will have to face an issue. So consciousness is rising to the point that, and Randy mentioned about all the psionic interference that's been sent or beamed against people, whether it's pedophilia, whether it's mind control in another form. But humans are becoming resistant, or many humans are becoming resistant to it. And we're even seeing the established media, the mouthpiece of the elite, beginning to start to ask questions. So the cracks are appearing. And I just see this as an ongoing process of this ascension. I'm using the word ascension because that's what I think people understand. It's an awareness, an awakening, so that, you know, if you stand and you watch a magician, and you watch a magician do a trick, and you ask that magician to do the same trick 10 times, there comes a point where you understand how the magician is doing the trick. But you don't take the eye off the board, you don't take the eye off the cups, whatever the cards are. But if you watch hard enough, you begin to see through it. And that's what's happening. And the problem for the magicians, and Randy did sort of touch on this, some alien creatures don't have the ability to create. They have the ability just to replicate or copy. And so many of these people, once they've run out of their ideas, once they've run out of their magic bag, they've got no other tricks to put forward, and humanity is seeing through it. And these people are in a flight of panic. So it is a very interesting and exciting time, but it's also a very dangerous time. That's my view.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Randy, would you like to comment on what Simon just shared?
Sure. Let's see, I'm sorry, I was making mental notes there to myself. I should have been having a notepad next to me. I was thinking of 3 different things, and then I got lost near at the end. Hold on, let me try and retrace my steps here for a
Sure.
second. Okay, so 2017, certainly a time where we're coming close to where I would say that if you just look at the past century and see how the tactical movement of what I consider to be the larger chessboard, we've definitely just been moving towards endgame, 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 endgame. And certainly we're at that point where, as we approach sort of between now and 2017, all I can say is, yeah, we're getting closer and closer and closer and closer to endgame sort of, you know, what's happening on the board sort of status. So what exactly that means and what exactly, I don't like to speculate. I'm a military tactician, and we're in the middle of a war and a conflict, and so I don't like to make too many predictions about how things are going to go or come out exactly, because we're still in the middle of that to see exactly how it's going to go. But I think that we have seen huge divisions on these upper levels where, you know, some of these sort of, you know, global controllers are not, you know, having a good time with their other global wealthy family elite folks and starting to have serious disagreements. And my understanding of this is because a very tiny few of them said, no, 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 we've got this great plan and it'll be the, you know, we'll get the whole world and everything. But it became, screw you guys, we're going to our little tiny hovel here on Mars, that we're going to have our superior genetic Nazi gene pool, and the rest of you are screwed. And when the rest of the wealthy families realized that they were not actually being included in that plan, then they started to rebel for personal preservation. So watching the Rockefellers divest their oil money, oh my God, that was so amazing. I was just like, oh, you guys are done for now. The Rockefellers took their oil money out, say goodbye to oil, and then the Navy just decided to release that they have a process to make fuel for their ships and their planes from seawater that they're going to start using now. So they're going to stop purchasing oil and petroleum for their ships and their planes. I mean, there's some movements to show that the people who are like, oil, 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 are no longer in favor, and that people in serious positions of power and authority are essentially given the finger to oil production and just saying, no, we're not doing it anymore. We're taking our money out. We're putting our technology elsewhere. screw you guys. So the Koch brothers can want to, dig shale oil and frack shale all they want, but if the Rockefellers pull their money out of oil and the Navy, which is one of the largest consumers of petroleum products in the world, says we're not going to use it anymore, that's the beginning of the death knell. That's the beginning of the end for oil use. You have this saltwater battery powered car that they've just released out in Germany or something. They put out and said, oh, guess what? Now we have a saltwater powered car. Of course, it's some luxury model that you have to be rich to buy, but the technology could be put into a Ford Focus. It's not, it's the same kind of technology. You still have these, we could still, take hydrogen cracking and crack hydrogen right out of salt water, like, I'm drawing a blank. Stan Meyer, who built his water-powered dune buggy in the late 1970s, did, and Daniel Dingle, who is a Philippine inventor who has made a device as well. He basically, fixes toasters and invented a similar system that he powers. I think he put it into a 90-something Honda Accord or something that basically just cracks the salt water, sends the hydrogen in a little tube right into the internal combustion engine, and because it's hydrogen, takes this tiny, tiny, tiny little amount to make the pistons run, and then kicks out water, which eventually will rust a steel engine, but, ceramic engine parts and so forth are how you deal with that sort of thing. So all this stuff is coming out, that we no longer need to be dependent, and we no longer need to be beholden to fossil fuels. And we're actually seeing, for the first time, these big players, the big financial families, the big military contractors, and the Navy, and finally some car manufacturers who are saying, no, we're turning the other direction. That's the beginning of the end for oil. So oil can struggle all it wants for the next few years, going, we're going to oil it all, but it's losing. It's a losing battle that it won't win. So I think what we're going to be achieving is seeing these rapid changes of people shifting sides, as I already talked about before, because people realize that they got sold out, and now that they have to switch their position and go with another plan, or everyone's doomed. And that's meant that this one tiny little group of neo-Nazi idiots has really sunk themselves, because they thought that they could fool everyone right up to that last minute. But like Simon says, a magician doing the magic trick, it's like they have to keep doing the same magic trick over and over and over again. And after a while, people are going, hey, I think that's an effed up trick. You're trying to just keep us in here while the gas keeps turning up and we're all going to die. You're doing that magic trick to distract us. And they're realizing that, you continue letting this person distract you and try and run the world. They're not going to run the world. They're going to destroy the whole thing. And so you better find someone else to put in the wheel of the car, or they're going to drive it off the cliff, so to speak.
Thank you. Now, going back to Simon's point, which is very interesting, he said, well, that's how ascension is working, or we're going through an ascension, which can be taken many different ways, but I think it's an increase of consciousness, or expansion of consciousness or frequency. And Simon can comment on that in just a moment as part of this. Getting back to Mars and Earth and Mars, do you think that Earth and Mars are simultaneously going through, quote, an ascension? That is, a mutual expansion of consciousness inside a universe, expansion and escalation of consciousness frequencies. We'll start first here with Simon, because you made that observation.
Yeah, all within the solar system.
Yeah.
All the planets are heating
yes,
up.
right, exactly.
All the planets are heating up, and all the planets are changing, and any living creature that has a free will actually be undergoing will be undergoing some form of change. The thing is, with the human race is a prison race, therefore its change needs to be the greatest. And this is the problem. It's like overheating. Some people will get it and some people won't. If you look at the Freemasons, this is why the Knights Templars are splitting from the other groups of Freemasons. The Knights Templars are preparing underground bases simply because, as Randy said, when they looked at their ticket to get off the planet, theirs was a fake. And so few people have actually got the real ticket that those that are left in positions of power are preparing for the worst, simply because they know the mindset of some of these people, and they want to have a fallback position themselves, hence why these private underground bases are being built under military establishments on Earth, which you can buy for so many $1 million. I mean, that's what's going on, because what happened was that the second tier elite found that they had more bunkers than they needed, so they started selling them to make money.
Right.
So that's what's happened there. On the ascension side of it, it is interesting because Randy now on 4 occasions has mentioned the word Nazi, and that's absolutely correct, because when Germany lost the Second World War, it actually won the peace, because America was so impressed with the level not just of physical technology, but with the level of mental technology it discovered, that it realized that it could not afford to let any other country in the world have this. And so the Nazi ideology, through individuals, but through corporate views, actually pervaded. For instance, in 1936, when the Germans were developing their Fritz remote control bomb, which was the first camera operated glide bomb ever in the world, the factories, I think there were 3 or 4 German companies making this, all the staff were compartmentalized into groups, so that no one group had the overall picture and no one group could talk to another group. And the Americans actually took that lock, stock and barrel and just replicated that right across the side. And when the Americans went in and found all the underground bases that the Germans had built, they replicated that. So Randy's absolutely right that it's not just an ideology. For many things, it's a way of life, it's a pattern. Now, Alfred, you know, but Randy may not know, that when my mother worked for British intelligence, the NSA, her job was to type out documents from German scientists from paperclip. So she didn't translate them, they were translated for her, Randy, but she typed them out. And these were a group of German scientists who were looking at exotic technologies. So the Germans really had a very, very powerful effect on the command and control structure, and it was how corporations basically usurped the political control. And Mars is important because some of the races on Mars can trace a link through to what I would call Aryan type linkage. And so the native Marsh humans have a very close connection with what we could loosely call a Nazi type ideology. Doesn't mean they're bad, it's just that there is a connection there through history.
So how would this connect with the quote ascension or expansion of consciousness? Is that occurring on Mars? That is, are similar consciousness energy processes occurring on Mars as are occurring here?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Alfred. I thought I explained that.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I'm just too simple-minded and I didn't catch it.
Alfred, how can you possibly to be simple-minded? That is ridiculous.
It's very early in the morning here. I'm sorry.
No, I don't accept that, Alfred. That you're far from simple. Let me just take it to another notch. Many hundreds of thousands of years ago, many millions of years ago, it was well known that the human race would at some point ascend, and I'm using the word. Now, when an entire species advances, it creates the most enormous amount of energy.
I see.
Now, other creatures who are trapped in a pit and can no longer escape from that because they've lost the ability to be spiritual, could get on the back of that and ascend with that. But because the way the universe is, because the way Source or God, however you want to look at it, there are certain rules that everybody has to play by. And one of those is that you cannot ascend on the back of another race unless you have moved towards a good position, you've moved far enough across. So beings like the mantids, who are actually trapped just as much as the humans are in their own position, would like to advance with that. The Draconis are undecided because they are so stuck in their world of ceremony and ritual and I am God and I will kill and eat who I want. But there are some of them who are saying, we're finished, we've had it, we're in a cul-de-sac. Here is a way to see if we can work with humans and see if we can get out of this mess. So the ascension process is well known and has been divined or predicted for a very long time. Much longer than the Mayan calendar, much longer before that. Every race on every planet in the whole multiverse goes through this process, Alfred. Every sentient living creature will advance. How else do you get to the fourth frequency, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth? If you survive and you change, you move up the ladder because you develop. You've got a contact there. Somebody wants you, Alfred.
Oh, my wife. Thank you. She's joined us at.
Hello.
Hello there.
I'm just telling you that I'm leaving and I'll be back later.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. Sorry.
That's nice. That's nice. So basically, that ascension is something that a number of species actually want to happen. The people who don't want to happen it are a large group of Draconis reptilians who want to keep the status quo, and their subservient grouping who run some elements of the planet. Now they're the ones that want to maintain the situation, but the majority now want this advancing change. And finally, there are other alien entities from higher frequencies, so beyond the fourth dimension, who are now throwing out the rule book and are interfering to try and bring a level playing field. So they're not coming in to win the war for the human race, because that's not allowed, but they are balancing it out to make it easier for the good guys to get to the top. And I really am interested in Randy's take on that.
Well, yeah, that's okay. So now there's another thing. I like to try and get through 5 things to get to that. There is the rule where people aren't allowed to just come in and fix it. They're not allowed to just come in and solve it, but they are absolutely allowed to make it more fair. So anything that they do, to balance the scale is sort of considered by any of the intergalactic judiciary bodies to be, okay, that's all right. They just kind of go, yeah, okay. They didn't tip the scale, out of balance. They just tried to make it more fair. And anything that anybody does to do that is considered allowed. So there is a technical, space where what do we want, what do we wish we could do versus what we're allowed to do. And then how do we find, a place where we can do something that's effective and helps the scale move, but doesn't violate, our, laws and sanctions, which would get then someone to say, hey, you violated that one too many times, back to the perimeter of the solar system, until you can prove that you can behave yourself. And no one wants to get, kicked out of the environment just because they stepped over a line. So most of the time, everyone really observes the rules and boundaries that they're set under because they want to be able to do the most effective thing that they can. And so they have to play by whatever rules or whatever treaties have been established for them to go by. As far as ascension of consciousness and the connection between Earth and Mars, the consciousness, everybody that I've talked to is very much of the liking mind to say that the consciousness of Earth and Mars are sisters and are very, 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 very intimately connected because of our interspecies moving back and forth over many, 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 many hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of years. So I don't think that it's a coincidence at all that we're experiencing collective ascension or harmonic rising of any kind at all. In fact, I would say that that amplification of that connection, extends beyond to the rest of the solar system and through the Sol system, and makes it even more possible that other beings and planets can all go through this sort of ascending process. And Simon's also correct in say that other species who realize that this is an opportunity for them to sort of surf the wave and get some elevation from something they've been pushed down, even in some cases farther than we have, and their ability to really sort of try and spiritually develop themselves is even harder. I mean, it's even to imagine harder than it is for us even to do so. And so they're looking for any methodology which might help elevate them as well. But there are rules. You can't just do that, because you also have to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So you have to be able to come in and say, yeah, we agree in doing this elevating consciousness thing. We're going to help you elevate. We're going to do something for us to elevate. You don't just to jump on the surfboard and ride the wave. You have to consciously, with intent and action, shift what you're doing to be of that other consciousness. So in some cases, you're talking about factions of extraterrestrials who really believe that they have to be different, be better, express a higher level of consciousness in order to try and jump onto that wave with everyone else to help their own species. While you may have factions within that species, just like we have, who are like, nah, I don't think we want that, and are trying to fight all the time with it. I want to add to the draconian question and the draconian problem. They certainly are having a situation where the number of actual draconian reptiles in their entire gene pool and in their entire consciousness pool is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. It's a finite number that keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, because my understanding at this point, they're afraid to breed with each other because they're so dangerous and so hostile that, if they attempt to get together and breed to make another pure Siakar draconian, which is these large, sort of dragony species, not the little ones, but the big ones, that they might just kill each other in the process. And they're so long-lived, but they continue to cheat and cheat and cheat and cheat in order to add years to their lives. So they're on a finite course to a dead end that's either we can stretch this out as long as we can, or we can change course. And there are those who simply have been on this course too long to change it, so they're not going to change their course. They're like, no, we're going to keep, trying to consume and extend our lives. Where there are those who are just like, oh, we've had enough of this. I'm not happy with this. There are parts of those draconian members who are just like, this is not working. I'm not happy with this. You're not happy with this. We haven't created anything that's good. We haven't created anything that's long-lasting, that's going to make the world or the universe a better place. All we've done is be selfish, and crap wherever we go. I'm kind of ashamed of that. So there is that division between the members of that own group as they're facing extinction. They are facing a finite extinction that they're eventually going to get to if they don't either learn to breed again or learn to sort of raise their own consciousness, because essentially they're genetically engineering all their middle managers, all their warrior caste, and all of that will fall apart the instant that their upper caste dies off. All of that will just completely disintegrate.
Do you have any comment on that, Simon? Or?
No, it sounds the dilemma that they have been faced. That I would add that, but they've known this. That's the problem. They've known this from the beginning, but as Randy said, they just hoped it would go away.
Yeah.
Right. Well, talking of Earth and Mars, there is some research, and you gentlemen can confirm it perhaps more than I, that suggests that prior to 9500 BC or some date of a solar system catastrophe, Earth and Mars were openly an interplanetary society. You can see ruins of under the rulership of the predecessors of the Egyptian pharaohs. You see all sorts of Egyptian art on the surface of Mars. And we've seen that through the efforts of Andy Bashago, who's headed up the Mars Anomaly Research Society curatorship of the NASA rover photos showing sarcophagi that have the carved statue of what looks like an Egyptian king that is with a conical headdress, like the Nefertiti conical headdress to hide the quote cone head effect. Right. And so some people say that there was a solar system catastrophe that led to the ecological effects of the current surface of Mars that led to the destruction of our maritime civilization on Earth. That was the end of the openly interplanetary society of Earth and Mars, and that sort of started up again around 1900 with the Martians signaling Tesla, and one thing led to another. J.P. Morgan furnished him. The Illuminati, working through Skull and Bones. My alma mater, Yale, was the second chapter of the Bavarian Illuminati, founded in 1776. And their mission was to reestablish the colonies on Mars, which has led, you see, Dick Cheney was a year ahead of me at Yale and flunked out his sophomore year, but he got into the non-Yale Skull and Bones. And so this all comes from the Bavarian Illuminati, which is reestablishing the old pre-solar system catastrophe Earth-Mars interplanetary society, which you've experienced as the Earth-Mars Defense Force and the Mars Colony Corporation. It's a bunch of Yaleys in secret societies.
Yeah.
I was in an above ground called Torsion Talon, which Skull and Bones infiltrated, and they shut me down on my night, which is how I kind of felt it. I've always been kind of the insider whistleblower on that realm, and so that's why I'm blowing the whistle on Dick Cheney tonight. You follow me? That's my little contribution to this circle. Okay, so my question is this. Their plan is to kind of exploit Mars, exploit Earth, and have an uber prison planet on both, kind of an elite theme park on both, and transfer their elite, depopulate the useless eaters on Earth, bring over the elite meet to greet, and have them repopulate and become surface dwellers on Earth. It seems that that's not occurring because we've shifted over to a positive timeline with unity consciousness coming in through the interdimensional portal of our universe as of December 21st, 2012, according to our scholars like Dr. Carl Johann Kalaman, embedded in the Pleiadian calendar known as the Mayan calendar. So that's very good news. What I heard you saying, both of you gentlemen, was the good news. And that is that both Earth and Mars are being liberated, and at some point we will have a public unification of the colonies of Earth and Mars. On Earth now, we have kind of a public society, but the public society on Earth is the human Earthling colonization of Mars is being hidden because it's being run by the Dick Cheney and the Skull and Bones machine and the Illuminati machine. That is being shredded by the positive timeline and unity consciousness, because duality consciousness, which is I win, you lose, kind of, plus minus, is being phased out. And so the inevitable result seems to be, after 9,500 years or more, a peaceful or an integration, a reintegration of an Earth-Mars interplanetary society of a positive sort, and a liberation of humans from their prison planet, and a learning to live in a multi-species, multicultural society vis-a-vis Mars. That is, Mars being a multi-species society. How's that for a vision? I open the floor for comments. Simon.
It will be that way if I have anything to say about it.
Great.
Simon, go ahead. That's all I have to say.
You have comments about it?
If I have anything to say about it, yes, it will.
Well, we know of Sirius A and Sirius B and the star systems, and it was predominantly from these star systems that what I would refer to as higher humans colonized Mars a very long time ago. And it was these higher humans that then interacted on Earth, and that's the connection with the human line. These creatures are the creatures that brought the Sphinx, the technology for the Great Pyramid, and that is why you see very similar structures on Mars, where certain aspects are being celebrated. And that goes back much longer than many people understand.
At least hundreds of thousands of years, to my understanding.
Yes, I agree with that. I think the future is exciting. Mars was decimated by a nuclear type explosion, and in fact, even today, if you had a basic Boy Scout equipment, you would detect the radiation spikes in some parts of Mars, and that's why some parts of Mars are off limits, and Randy will know that. But Mars does have some very interesting minerals, some very interesting metals, which do take the attention of certain species. The other thing is that Mars is a very handy base for skipping across to the Moon, and it's a very interesting detecting point for craft coming into locality within the Earth. So Mars has a strategic value, not just an economic value, and Randy will know that.
Yeah, for sure.
The moon also, but then the moon, its creation is somewhat different from Mars. And if we go back to the days of the Bible, and the Bible says that Adam and Eve left the Eden. And I've got no problem with that, except of course I know that there wasn't just Adam and Eve, there were many hundreds of human type creatures, and what the Bible doesn't tell you is that Adam and Eve split these humans into two groups, and they both left the Garden of Eden, and that's exactly why there is a base on Mars and a base on the Moon, and they're called Adam and Eve, because it is representing the fact that the humans Exodus left the Garden of Eden two waves, and so that is why you have the Adam and Eve base in the Mars and the Moon. So we are linked, and it was very interesting that Randy physically joined his two fingers together to show how inexorably linked Mars and Earth is, and he used the term the sister planets, and that actually is a term used by people in the know. The sad thing is that the red sister is reasonably well destroyed, has had most of its atmosphere ripped off it, but not entirely. And what I would say is that we mustn't allow that to happen to this sister. And I would much prefer to have a happy, decent life for myself and my children on this planet than have to go into an artificially maintained biosphere on a planet that, yes, is connected to us, but isn't my planet of choice. And it just shows the mindset of some people who are prepared to live a life on a very difficult planet, a very difficult environment, just to escape a world which they feel that it is beyond their control to maintain, because the system now is become greater than the individuals. And that is the timeline we're on, a positive timeline. About 15 to 20 years ago, the timeline changed, and then the bad guys have not been able to bring that back. They come close on 2 occasions to drag this line back, but they haven't, and now it's too late. So this is the line they're on. This is where we're going.
Thank you. May I ask you one question? From an historical perspective, could you share with us what the origin and circumstances were of the nuclear explosion that did such damage to Mars?
May I ask you why you're asking that question, Alfred, please?
Number one, as an exopolitical historian, I have profound interest. Number two, from a cautionary standpoint for Earth.
Right. It was a suicide, I'm not going to go into huge detail, it was a suicide mission to take out a particular base. It was a mission from which the inhabitants of the weapon knew they would never return. It was effective, and it was over effective. It ripped off the atmosphere. A lot of the water that was on Mars ended up on Earth. A lot of the life organisms was put on Earth. That's why we've got stuff from Mars on our planet. And it damn near destroyed this planet as well. But that wasn't the intention. So it was a military operation to take out a base, which was too successful.
And approximately what was the date of that?
Do you mind if I don't tell you that?
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. Can you give any details as to the nature of the military operation? That is, who against who? Or?
I don't think that's a problem. If anybody's ever watched any of my presentations, I know I upset people when I talk about Pleiadians being quite warlike. If you listen to YouTube videos, everybody wants to be a Pleiadian because they're the good guys. Nobody wants to be a reptilian, by the way.
Right.
And what I would say is that that the Pleiadians give as good as they get. They are actually incredibly warlike. Doesn't mean they're not good people, but they are very warlike. And this was a Pleiadian suicide mission to take out their arch enemies who had a base, and it was rather too effective. Okay.
I see, and there was no, and I take it that there are no interplanetary judicial authorities that took umbrage to that.
All right, Alfred.
I mean, I'm a lawyer and a judge. I mean, that's an outrage.
Right. Okay. Actually, I'll go along with what Randy said earlier. Sometimes somebody tips the balance in one way. How do you bring that balance back? You have 2 ways to bring the balance back. You either do it diplomatically or you do it militarily. If you cannot bring it back diplomatically, then a military solution is found. The diplomat failed, the military solution went in. And that's what happened. So in actual fact, the universe agreed with that action because everything else had been tried and failed. And this was the last point to create it, a physical happening. Because you know what? The universe knows if you let something or someone get away with something, they just keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's what happened.
Now, I'll just push with a couple of questions. Was that event part of what one would call the Lucifer Rebellion?
No.
No. Okay, so this was just plain kind of turf war against
this is between a higher human group and a reptilian group who really don't like each other.
I see. And it was just the base. It was not, that is, there were other humans on that planet.
Right. Well, if you find Palladian human beings with Palladian souls, there are plenty of them on the planet. If they are in connection with themselves, they are absolutely full of karma, and that's why many Palladians are chewed up inside, because in order to carry out that mission, that on behalf of that whole race, they did kill a large number of what do you call them, non-combatants.
Yeah.
And the Palladian race has a massive amount of karma because of that one incident. And that's why Palladians, as a large number, have been incarnating on planet Earth to attempt to undo that karma. Although for most people, they don't remember why they're doing it.
Right. And it's not only a large number of people, but also a Gaia, a living planetary organism, was destroyed.
Yes.
It was ecocide.
Yes.
So these are all violations, I assume, of galactic and universal norms that exist and are enforced variously by galactic governance.
Yes, but Randy knows that in order to save the millions, you sometimes have to kill the thousands.
Right.
And that was the decision taken. You see, Alfred, you're looking at it from a lawyer's perspective. Randy will look at it from a military perspective. And so it is very interesting, your two takes on it.
Well, no, I'm looking at it from Mars' perspective. I think Mars took a beating, and look at poor Mars. It was killed.
Well, let's see what Randy has to say, because I'd be interested.
Well, I mean, it wasn't killed. It was beaten within an inch of its life and left in the gutter to die. But I mean, it didn't die. It survived, and it. I mean, to the point of causing a huge amount of reflection amongst the indigenous folks who live there and their ways to say, maybe we made this happen because we just couldn't stop fighting. And so there was a huge change in perception and attitude, so that the majority opinion of the raptors on Mars is take care of Mars. They really have no concern about trying to fix the rest of the galaxy, trying to get in anybody else's business. They have no interest in conquest. I mean, I have to agree with Simon that the reptilian brain tends to want to be warlike and conquesting, and the Draconians certainly have this very reptilian brain. But I would also argue that it's very possible for raptors and reptiles to evolve and to get to a point where they can go, maybe that's not the best way to do things. And I can know of 3 reptile species that I can think of right off the top of my head who all share sort of an evolved attitude about aggression, where they had to learn from some experiences way back in their history that if you just keep doing that, it's going to end you in a very, very bad, awkward place. So the native raptors now on Mars tend to have one of 2 ways of doing things, which is to either keep fighting amongst themselves as a way of trying to cleanse and purify themselves. Believe it or not, they continue to see that continuing to fight amongst each other is a way of purging and cleansing this thing from themselves, because one of the things that they do anymore is they refuse to use advanced technology when they fight each other, except when they're absolutely forced to. So when I talk about being confronted by phalanxes of reptiles carrying savage weapons, and people are like, well, why didn't they have plasma guns? And I'm like, because they don't believe in them. It's not really their way of doing things. They don't think that they're bettering themselves by engaging in combat in a dishonorable way, and they feel that it's better to go into battle and die with honor than to stab somebody in the back and win. So part of what they feel like they're going through karmically is this cleansing process, which is very violent and very aggressive, and is very, very fighting amongst themselves. We kind of bashed each other in through the 13, 14, and 1500s. Large groups of people coming together and beating each other with blunt objects in order to sort of work out issues, and that's kind of where they feel like they're at. The Now, our experience with the northern tribes is they also have the sort of attitude of, fighting through honor and honor through fighting, but they also have a very evolved attitude about their consciousness and their relationship with the planet, so that they feel very, very connected to the consciousness of their planet, and basically feel like their entire goal right now is to keep connecting with the consciousness of their planet, to heal their planet, terraform the planet back. When they can restore vegetation and water across the surface of the planet and have healed the planet, then they can feel like they did their job, which is, we broke it, we have to fix it. So it doesn't matter how long it takes us. If it takes us 10,000 years, 20,000 years, 50,000 years, it doesn't matter. We're going to take off all our advanced equipment and put our computers down, and we're going to get out our shovels and our hose, and we're going to fix it. So it's a very honorable attitude. But I wouldn't necessarily say that means that you should just walk up to any one of them and go, "Hey, have a hug," because chances are you're going to get eaten. Raptors and reptiles are just they're not fuzzy. You don't just walk up to them and say hi. Really, to be honest, if you want to greet a group of reptiles, you have to come into the group. You have to stand there and do this sort of like Maori thing, like, I'm standing in my space, and then, spit on the ground and challenge one of them. And then one of them come, and you'll have like this wrestling match. And if you can fare, then they'll consider yourself worthy to actually then say hi to. But if you can't fight and prove yourself worthy, you're a snack.
I'm very interested in what Randy's saying there, because I'm aware that there is a group that do not use energy weapons. And would you refer to this group as the scimitar group, Randy?
Say that again. Refer to them as the what now?
Would you refer to them as the scimitar group, the group that used curved swords?
Yes. That was mainly the tribes that we dealt with and faced in combat, and that I personally got to communicate with experience eventually. Yeah, absolutely. That would be them.
Yes. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. But I would just add to all of that I think that the changing in consciousness is part of what they're going through for their own reasons because of what happened to them, and they have some very different attitudes about how to work through that. But they would very much like to see, Earthlings and terrestrial, Martians get back together as sort of communicating and being friendly again. And it was really when, we were captured, our squad was captured, and they essentially blood tested everyone. And when they came to me and were like, "You're more like us than everyone else. Why? We need to understand that, because if you're that much like us, then that means you're a cousin. And if you're a cousin, that means we can't hate you. That means you're our family. So we have to understand if you're really our cousin or not, and we have to treat you like family. And in order to do that, we're going to try and teach you the family ways. And if you can understand the family ways, then you must be family, and then, we'll treat you like family." And so at that point, the discussion changed from, we have to fight with these humans because there are invaders, to we have to help the small children humans who don't understand who they are, and we have to help them grow up and understand themselves. So
Randy, it's amazing. We've nearly come to the end of the show, and we finally got something out of you, in the sense that when we first started, within a few minutes, I said to Randy, "You have a lot of reptilian in you," which Randy agreed. And now it's interesting that Randy's actually sharing with us that when he was checked over, there was something there which showed. I mean, I detected that straight away, Randy. Mm-hmm. It was very obvious to me that you had a connection there, and it's just really nice that you've now sort of come out and said, "Actually, yes, I do," on that level. And it may well have not just saved your life, Randy, but more than that, it elevated you into a position where communication was then opened between that group and your commanding officers and beyond them, right, which said, "This guy can do a little bit of work between both of us, and he does come under our protection." So I think that's quite pivotal, Randy.
I think that's absolutely true, and my experience of that was essentially when they said, "Well, we think you're like us, so we have to figure this out." "Well, okay, fine, we're going to keep you alive, but we're killing everybody else in your squad." And I said, "No. I said, if you kill everybody else in my squad, you have to kill me too. That's not okay." I said, either we all live or we all die. And when they really were putting the sword to my throat, you mean that? I was like, yeah, either we all live or they all die. Then they finally said, okay, that proves that you're more like us than we thought you were. The fact that you're willing to die, for your team members.
That's really important. I'm going to just hang on, Alfred. I'm just going to say that when I was a young child, there is a initiation process that one has to go through with a reptilian group, and that is that you are given a sword, not a curved sword, a straight sword, and then you have to throw it in the air so it spins. So you stand underneath it, it spins, and as it drops, it's for humans, the humans who are on a program. As the sword drops, most children will run from the sword naturally. They're out the program, it's failed. What
Right.
you have to do is catch it by the hilt. So what I'm saying is that the sword, the blade, plays an incredibly important part of some of these groups. That's why we've got the sword in the stone story. We've got the Sarmatians from ancient Rome who had the dragon standard and the sword. That culture is absolutely interwoven in many human lines, and it was just interesting to hear about the sword being held to his throat, because again, that is a ritual, that is a ceremony to test his strength,
Right.
to see if he would back off and sell his friends for his own life.
Yep. Exactly.
Now
And I would.
that is the culture that we deal with. Now, I've been public with this, Randy, that 1/3 of my soul is mantis, 1/3 of my soul is hollow earth human, and the other third is a reptilian, draconis reptilian. So I fully understand exactly what was going on there. And if you weren't a brave man, they would have killed you. Well, they would have actually chopped your head off.
Yeah.
But you were a brave man, and they honoured that, and they recognised that. Sorry, Alfred, I beg your pardon, but I thought that was important.
No, thank you.
Oh,
I don't talk about it
extraordinary.
very often. It's one of those areas that, if I'm really pressed on, I will talk about it. But it's kind of personal, and so it's a little still awkward to try and talk about, because I don't expect people to understand it in any way, shape, or form. And it was such a deeply personal experience that I don't normally talk about it. But I am happy to share with you guys the experience. It was absolutely life-changing in every way that conceivably possible. And the message really seemed to be that, I was being tested mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, all of these sort of ethical, moral tests and guidelines. And after a certain amount of time being determined that I passed those tests, basically that's when I got, cut down off the pole that I was hanging off of, by my toes, up like this for how many days, I can't remember. It's a stress position. It wasn't torture. I wasn't like being poked with hot pokers. It was a stress position, so that, sun ceremony, is a stress position. You put hooks in yourself and you hang out in front of the hot sun as a way of, getting your mind-body experience to go through a change. So this kind of a stress position was designed to, not to make me torturous or to sort of like do what we say, but more of like, we want to get at the real answer. And the only way we know we're going to get at the real answer is if we crank up your stress level to a point where you can't lie. And so there was a certain point that there was no way that I not only could or would or had any interest in trying to deceive or say anything that was to save my own skin. I just knew that the only way that I was going to get out of this alive was to tell the absolute truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And either that was going to get me through this, or it wasn't, or I was going to end up dead. So I somehow knew that intuitively and just knew that I had to just keep staying honest. But I'll be honest that part of what's happening with the cortisol levels and the testosterone levels and the endorphin levels and all the things that are happening from that stress position and sleep deprivation does have a way of opening your mind and causing you to get more and more into your pure self if, someone who's really masterful and knows how to do that and isn't just trying to crack you open like a nut. So it was definitely an experience where, they were trying to, peel me away to understand whether or not I was really worthy for them to even talk to and to even have a conversation with and to even try and teach. Is he worthy for us to even try and teach? They had to come to that conclusion before they were going to spend any time. And I feel incredibly honored that they decided that I was worthy. And I spent, it was almost 5.5, less than 6 months or something, in their community and lived among them and with them, and it was a really blessed experience, and I got to learn a lot from it. And part of what I got to learn was something that I didn't even know at that time, which is that we were related. We were physically and biologically related. Up until that point, I mean, that was news to me. When they are saying, well, you're like us. What is up with that? We want to understand. They were asking me, why are you like us? And I was like, I don't know. Why are you asking me? I have no idea why I'm like you. But they were very curious to understand the answer to that question and really wanted to know, is this a long lost cousin come back or not?
Another question they may well have asked you, Randy, is why are you here?
Oh, that was definitely asked. And all I could really answer to that was, I'm sworn to do my duty as a soldier, and I go where they tell me to go, and I do what they tell me to.
But it's beyond that. It's beyond that. It's
true.
It's why is a creature like you here now at this time? That's what they're asking, because they know that you're related, and they're trying to look at the greater picture that's occurring. What has happened to bring you into their world? And that's what's thrown them into that. Now, the other thing that's really interesting, Alfred, is that many of these creatures could just have gone into Randy's head mentally and just got the answer like that. But that's not the way they do it, because, again, it's not free will. If you go into someone's head and you take the answer out, that hasn't been given to you freely. So the physical aspect of the work that they did on him was in order to, from their own heraldic military standpoint, it made it honorable, but also there was still free will here, because Randy could still have said, you know what, screw you, which I'm sure you did at the early stages, but because the answer they got was through the process that they got, it meant that they were entirely happy with the whole situation, and that's it. Once they accepted that, then Randy had a ticket that he could go backwards and forwards within reason, and so Randy and I do have some very common interests, actually, although through different routes we have actually understood each other quite well, I think.
Amazing. Well, I think that this is extraordinary. These 2 hours have gone by in a flash. Could you each take a minute and just with any final observations you'd like for us, for our audience, for each other, for the roundtable? Simon, you want to?
I was going to say Randy first.
Okay. Either of you.
Sure. I think that we've definitely reached a point where, with someone like Simon, who's been, who came out to talk publicly about, his experience with extraterrestrials before he ran for office, who was legally elected by a constituency after having come forward to say that, I think that's a huge, huge, huge step in the right direction, where we're seeing that the people, I almost said irregardless again, regardless, I have a friend who's trying to break me of that habit, because I had a teacher who said irregardless all the time and taught it to me wrong, and so I've been trying to untrain myself that it's not really a word. So regardless of how you want to sort of see that experience, it has made it more true that the people are ready to hear the truth, regardless of whether the so-called elected leaders that we have now are willing to admit to it. So we have tons of people on our elected system who are still extraterrestrials. What do you mean extraterrestrials? But at the same time, we clearly have a vein of so many of them that are pushing and pushing and pushing to try and get people to talk, and the side doors are flying open in every direction, and the side windows and things are flying out in every direction, that I don't think we can really say anymore that there is a concerted effort to keep secrecy anymore. I don't think that's the case. I think we can say there's a small faction anymore that has got this grip that is still trying to keep secrecy, and everyone else is ready to pry it out of their hands with a crowbar. And I think that based on many of the conversations that we've had today and other things that we've all talked about, we're seeing that happen. We're closer to that than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and we're just going to get closer and closer until we get to a point where, we sort of break the glass ceiling. There is a point where disclosure ends. There's a point where the official, extraterrestrials what? There's a moment where that ends. Now, where that moment will be, who is going to be the person who has the press conference, or what event will it be that happens, or what person comes out to go from, here on one side, and then now we're here after disclosure on the other side. But it's an inevitable point. It is an inevitable point that we're going to reach pretty darn soon. Will it be 2017? Very possibly. Will it be a little before, a little after? Also very possibly. Do I think it's going to be beyond 2023 or 2024? No, I don't think so. I can't say, yes, disclosure will happen before that. I will say that I will be the most astonished, amazed, and I'd eat my hat if we got to 2023 and we hadn't had some kind of actual disclosure admission by some official apparatus of Western state or government. So I think we're in an amazing process, and we're making amazing progress as we go through step by step. And I want to applaud Simon for being able to speak truthfully and get elected and work for the people and do what he can. I have a friend who I won't name who's in British government, who's, I think, a very, very hard worker and is doing a really great job. And his folks live very, very near you, Simon. So he said, "Oh yeah, Simon, my folks live near there. He's a good guy." So yeah, everyone, people around locally like you and think you're a good guy. I've heard that.
Oh, that's really intrigued me. I shan't go into your mind, Randy, and find out what it is, because that would be an invasion of free will.
It would be.
I only use it to protect myself, Randy. I never go out to do anything naughty with it.
No.
I think, looking at the state of American politics, that it is natural that a Republican president will now be elected. The question is, will it be the Bush? Because this will be a very strong indication of the power struggle that's taking place. I think, is it Jeb Bush?
Yes.
Jeb with a G.
Jeb Bush.
Yeah, Jeb.
Okay, well, he is the guy that would most hold up our procedure at the moment. So that's the money's on that man at the moment from the elites. However, it will be very interesting, because I'm expecting a new hat to be thrown into the ring before the next presidential election, which I'm not saying that person will win, but what that person may do is cause such a swing of votes that the almost soon to be elected next president might not be the person they expect. So that will have a very powerful effect on disclosure, because if you get a Bush in there, that will hold back disclosure for 2 to 3 years. And finally, there are outside influences that have basically told the American administration that unless they manage disclosure, it will be forced upon them. And in which case they will have no control over how they manage the situation that occurs from that. And that is the problem. Now, what's happened in the past is that the side making that threat has given ground and said, okay, you can have another 6 months, you can have another year, but that's now finished and they've got a deadline. And again, that's another real problem for them. So we are going to get disclosure, and it will have to be through official channels. And it can't come soon enough, Alfred. We all agree it can't come soon enough.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you both. This is a round table that has left myself and all of us, I think, but watching with a sense of hope. And I just want to thank you both for having taken time out today. I know that it's very late in the UK to participate with us, and I hope that in the future that when the occasion merits, we'll be able to reconvene the roundtable once more to pass its wisdom and to bring us fresh insight. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thank you. So, thank you, gentlemen, and all power to you.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been wonderful to speak to you, Alfred and Randy. I have enjoyed it. It's not been confrontational. It could have been. But, you know, if we all believe in the greater good, then that's what we are. So, listen, God bless you all. Thanks ever so much. Take care.
Certainly.
Bye-bye.
Thank you both as well. Thank you very, very much. Semper Fi.